Welcome to the resemblance, humiliated at a last week's promotion party. That may seem like the weakest until one call changes everything. Behind her silently lies a powerful secret that destroys her sister color and equals 10 years of betrayal.
The promotion party felt absolutely suffocating while dozens of judging eyes continuously stared directly at my corner. My name is Daphne. I am 29 years old, and tonight, I became the main target of my own family's cruel ridicule. My older sister intentionally shoved a heavy red wine bottle toward my chest, while loudly demanding I pour a full glass for every relative in the room to assert her absolute dominance. I completely refused to become a lowly servant in her arrogant theatrical performance, so I firmly placed the bottle down onto the glass table with the calmest attitude I could muster. A stinging slap immediately struck my cheek right before my older sister glared at me and spat, "Loser!" over the mocking laughter of our shared bloodline. The sound echoed sharply across the room, while people whispered and enjoyed my humiliation like it was cheap entertainment. I did not shed a single tear over their pathetic behavior, but instead turned my back on the crowd to step outside onto the quiet balcony. I dialed a very familiar number on my phone to issue a strict command without giving the person on the other end any room for negotiation. I spoke directly into the receiver with a steady voice. "You have 5 minutes to resolve this." Barely 1 minute after I ended that decisive call, my older sister's phone began ringing frantically inside the living room to signal the beginning of her total downfall. Before I reveal the shocking truth of what actually happened to completely shatter their arrogance tonight, please take a quick moment to like this video and subscribe to the Revenge Mode channel. Tell me your country in the comments below so we can finally begin this satisfying story of absolute justice. The painful past always leaves behind indelible scars, while serving as the primary motivation shaping exactly the kind of resilient person I am today. My father, Walter, alongside my mother, Sylvia, ruthlessly favored Carmen throughout our entire childhood, while treating my very existence as a constant, frustrating burden. Their blatant favoritism reached an unforgivable climax 10 years ago when they abruptly kicked me out of our family home without providing even a single dollar for basic survival. Standing alone on that cold pavement forced me to realize that blood relations meant absolutely nothing when compared to the undeniable power of pure financial independence in this ruthless world. That ultimate betrayal completely shattered any remaining emotional attachment to my relatives, while simultaneously igniting a profoundly powerful drive within me to ruthlessly succeed against all odds. I began my independent professional journey by desperately pouring my meager savings into a small commercial investment deal that ultimately failed miserably during its initial operational stages. Refusing to let that massive financial setback permanently destroy my long-term future prospects, I aggressively taught myself extremely strict risk management protocols to survive the deeply brutal corporate landscape. Applying those harsh analytical lessons consistently allowed me to systematically multiply my remaining capital many times over through highly calculated market maneuvers over several grueling years of constant struggle. Those relentless entrepreneurial efforts eventually culminated in my highly successful establishment of a completely secretive venture capital firm operating entirely behind closed doors to permanently mask my true identity. I specifically utilized a completely anonymous corporate proxy account to directly send substantial monthly financial support back to Walter and Sylvia over the course of the past several consecutive years. My deliberate decision to provide them with that steady stream of money stemmed absolutely not from any lingering sense of familial love or any misguided daughterly obligation toward them. Maintaining those secret financial transfers served solely to prove to myself that I possessed a level of professional capability fundamentally superior to their inherently selfish nature. Watching them unknowingly survive on the exact financial wealth generated by the specific child they previously discarded brought me an immense sense of profound, silent psychological vindication. My carefully separated worlds violently collided when I proactively reviewed the massive list of prospective corporate acquisition targets designated for my venture capital firm during the previous financial quarter. I immediately initiated a highly comprehensive investigation into every single operational file, after spotting Carmen listed prominently within the senior management directory of a massive retail corporation we planned to purchase. Refusing to rely on basic summary reports, I personally scrutinized thousands of internal corporate communications, along with various departmental audits, to fully understand the exact deceptive mechanisms she utilized to secure her fraudulent promotions over the years. External forensic accountants were secretly hired to painstakingly trace the exact origins of her seemingly successful quarterly figures to completely expose the underlying reality of her rapidly failing retail division. This methodical collection of substantial documentary evidence highlighted her gross managerial incompetence alongside the numerous falsified performance metrics she regularly submitted to her oblivious corporate superiors to maintain her facade. Cross-referencing her departmental expense reports with the official corporate revenue statements allowed me to legally document a clear historical pattern of severe corporate mismanagement spanning multiple fiscal quarters. My hidden executive position subsequently enabled me to quietly orchestrate the complete acquisition of her retail employer through a highly obscured shell company without raising any internal suspicions from the existing board members. Holding the absolute controlling stake in her company finally positioned me to execute a flawless destruction of her entirely fabricated career while remaining completely anonymous securely in the shadows. Exactly 2 weeks before that disastrous gathering took place, a ridiculously ostentatious gold-foiled invitation was delivered directly to my private executive office. The thick envelope carried a distinct arrogance that immediately reminded me of the suffocating environment I had escaped 10 years ago. The elegant calligraphy spelling out my name felt like a deliberate taunt, designed to remind me of my supposed inferiority within the family hierarchy. Staring at the expensive card boasting about Carmen securing her brand new regional manager position provided the exact missing element required for my comprehensive counterattack. Holding that arrogant piece of paper confirmed her unbearable ego would completely blind her to the devastating reality rapidly approaching her entirely fabricated corporate kingdom. She foolishly believed this promotion cemented her superiority, without realizing her newly acquired title placed her directly under my absolute financial control. My best friend Stella walked into my workspace shortly after the delivery to carefully review the escalating situation regarding my estranged biological family. Reading the condescending tone printed across the glossy invitation immediately triggered her fierce protective instincts regarding my long history of silently enduring their toxic emotional abuse. She firmly slammed the card onto my glass desk while aggressively warning me against allowing those heartless people to trample over my fragile dignity another time. "Are you seriously planning to go back there just to be publicly humiliated by them again, Daphne?" Stella asked with genuine frustration deeply lacing her voice. "The official board of directors meeting takes place immediately after the party." I replied calmly while meticulously organizing the scattered legal documents across my desk. This specific timeline presents the absolute perfect strategic window to officially trigger the decisive personnel changes across her entire retail division. Leaving Stella to thoroughly process my highly calculated intentions, I scheduled an urgent afternoon meeting with my lawyer Julian to rigorously review the accumulated evidence. We spent several grueling hours analyzing a massive stack of confidential corporate files, clearly proving numerous severe financial violations deliberately hidden from official regulatory audits. Every single fraudulent quarterly report contained within those heavy secure folders bore the unmistakable authorizing signature of Carmen herself. Julian meticulously highlighted each numerical discrepancy to ensure our upcoming legal foundation remained entirely impenetrable when the inevitable corporate fallout finally occurred. We double-checked every regulatory loophole she exploited to guarantee she possessed zero avenues for legal retaliation once the termination became public knowledge. The sheer magnitude of her financial deception proved she lacked both basic ethical standards along with fundamental corporate competency. Booking a premium flight back to California was absolutely not some pathetic emotional decision driven by a lingering subconscious desire for impossible familial reconciliation. My physical presence at that ridiculous celebration served strictly as a highly calculated strategic maneuver to position myself perfectly ahead of the upcoming corporate takeover. Arriving exactly when her inflated ego reached its absolute peak would significantly maximize the psychological impact of her impending professional destruction. I needed to witness her peak arrogance firsthand to completely validate the severe professional execution I was about to unleash upon her unearned career. We finalized every necessary legal document alongside the immediate termination orders before securely locking them inside a specialized encrypted digital briefcase for the upcoming trip. Those highly confidential papers completely detailed her systematic corporate fraud, while officially stripping her of all managerial authority, effective immediately upon authorized delivery. Julian explicitly confirmed the Human Resources Department at the parent company stood entirely ready to process the dismissal the second my confirmation call came through. Everything was flawlessly prepared to absolute perfection, while quietly waiting for the exact moment I finally issued the ultimate command to execute the fatal strike. There remained no possibility of turning back, because the wheels of absolute corporate justice were already set into irreversible motion. Exactly 48 hours before initiating that fateful telephone call, I stepped out of a hired vehicle directly in front of a sprawling gated villa located within Calabasas. Staring at the ostentatious property featuring an expansive luxury pool immediately reminded me that this entire estate represented a physical manifestation of massive corporate fraud. This supposedly magnificent residence was actually a heavily mortgaged asset directly tied to the highly manipulated financial reports Carmen continually submitted to her oblivious executive board. She utilized those illicitly acquired corporate bonuses to fund this ridiculous lifestyle, while desperately pretending to possess genuine generational wealth. The meticulously manicured lawns surrounding the property served as nothing more than an expensive illusion, purposely crafted to deceive everyone into believing her false narrative of corporate success. Stepping through the grand double doors revealed a crowded living room, where Walter and Sylvia were entirely preoccupied with showering relentless praise upon their eldest daughter. They barely paused their enthusiastic adulation to shoot me completely frigid glances that made me feel exactly like an unwelcome trespasser intruding upon their exclusive celebration. Neither of my parents bothered to offer a basic greeting or even acknowledge my arrival, beyond those initial expressions of profound familial disappointment. Their blatant dismissal effectively signaled to everyone present that my sole purpose tonight was serving as a convenient stepping stone to further elevate the newly promoted regional manager. Standing among familiar faces holding crystal champagne flutes only reinforced my profound realization regarding their shallow materialistic values, heavily dictating every single family interaction. The surrounding relatives quickly picked up on that hostile parental energy, while eagerly waiting for someone to initiate the traditional family pastime of verbally degrading my existence. Instead of enduring a chaotic chorus of random insults from various extended family members, the collective room suddenly quieted down to allow the guest of honor to deliver her precision strike. Mom approached me with a condescending smirk masking her cruel intentions, before speaking loudly enough for the entire gathered audience to hear her ridiculous proposition. Carmen always says you are really only suited for handling menial chores around the house, so maybe you should finally move in here to help her out full-time. Mom suggested with a sickeningly fake tone of maternal concern. Carmen stepped forward while swirling a large glass of expensive red wine to deliver her own venomous contribution to the escalating public humiliation. Whoa, what gives a pathetic loser like you the right to even step foot into this magnificent house unless I explicitly invited you to serve us? Carmen spat viciously while scanning my deliberately modest attire with absolute disgust. I completely ignored Sylvia's utterly absurd proposal regarding domestic servitude by purposefully maintaining a stoic facial expression completely devoid of any visible emotional reaction. Swallowing the immediate instinct to verbally destroy their fragile egos required immense psychological discipline, while I patiently waited for the absolute perfect strategic moment to execute my retaliation. Every passing second of my calculated silence further emboldened the surrounding guests to quietly chuckle at my supposed cowardice in the face of such direct, unprovoked hostility. Refusing to defend myself against their coordinated verbal assault essentially granted Carmen the unspoken permission to aggressively inflate her own toxic narcissism without encountering any resistance. I deliberately absorbed every single degrading comment because allowing her arrogance to reach its absolute zenith right in front of 30 attentive relatives was a vital component of my trap. Watching her parade around the living room while openly mocking my financial status merely confirmed that bringing down this entire corrupt family structure was the only correct path forward. Their collective willingness to participate in bullying an unwanted family member demonstrated precisely why they deserved absolutely no mercy once the impending financial execution finally commenced. Exactly 1 minute after I terminated my brief phone call out on the quiet balcony, the suffocating arrogance permeating the living room finally began to collapse. The sudden shrill ringing of a mobile device pierced the triumphant atmosphere filled with clinking champagne glasses. Carmen snatched her phone from the glass coffee table with visible annoyance before answering the unexpected interruption using the loud speakerphone setting. She clearly expected another congratulatory message from a subordinate, but instead encountered a purely bureaucratic nightmare. Her flushed face instantly drained of color the moment an authoritative voice representing the senior corporate headquarters echoed clearly across the silent room. The representative from the Executive Human Resources Department bluntly announced her immediate professional termination, effective the very second this conversation concluded. This unyielding voice explicitly cited severe abuse of executive power alongside massive financial falsifications as the undeniable grounds for her immediate removal. Hearing those devastating official charges broadcasted so publicly caused the entire celebratory atmosphere to freeze into absolute breathless shock among the gathered relatives. Nobody dared to utter a single syllable while witnessing the supposedly invincible regional manager being verbally dismantled by her unseen corporate superiors. "Hello, what are you saying right now? Firing me immediately because of alleged accounting fraud?" Carmen stammered uncontrollably with a violently trembling voice while desperately clutching her expensive dress. I stepped casually back inside the paralyzed room to deliver my completely unexpected contribution to her rapidly unfolding professional nightmare. "The call I just made outside wasn't to request your dismissal, but to confirm the termination order was fully ready," I stated with chilling calm while locking eyes with her. Her manicured fingers went numb, causing the smartphone to slip freely from her loose grip before hitting the thick Persian rug with a dull thud. That pathetic physical drop perfectly symbolized the exact defining moment when every single one of her fabricated career achievements was ruthlessly stripped away forever. She stood completely frozen like a broken statue, while the undeniable reality of her total professional destruction slowly washed over her panicked mind. The immense power she wielded over our relatives merely moments ago completely evaporated into thin air, leaving behind a terrified woman facing severe legal consequences. Mom alongside Dad frantically shoved their way through the paralyzed crowd of whispering cousins to reach their completely devastated golden child. Sylvia grabbed her daughter's shaking shoulders while desperately demanding an immediate explanation regarding whatever catastrophic misunderstanding just ruined their glorious family celebration. Walter paced around the expensive furniture while repeatedly yelling about hiring top corporate lawyers to fight this supposedly ridiculous injustice against his perfect daughter. They constantly believed their favorite daughter possessed absolute, untouchable corporate authority, shielding their entirely lavish lifestyle. They completely failed to comprehend how their carefully constructed delusional reality was permanently shattered within the span of a single brief telephone conversation. Their desperate denial only amplified the pathetic nature of their unwavering worship toward a fundamentally corrupt individual. Ignoring her panicking parents completely, Carmen violently dropped to her knees to retrieve the fallen device to frantically dial the corporate hotline back. She desperately begged the automated system to connect her with any senior executive willing to listen to her pathetic excuses regarding the missing retail funds. Every frantic attempt to beg for professional leniency or negotiate a quiet resignation was met entirely with the absolute cold silence of a permanently disconnected extension. The massive retail corporation she proudly boasted about controlling mere minutes ago had officially severed all administrative ties with her completely fraudulent existence. Her tearful pleas echoed pathetically throughout the luxurious living room, serving as a fitting conclusion to her brief reign of undeserved corporate supremacy. 15 minutes after that terrifying shock completely paralyzed everyone present, I calmly walked back into the center of the living room, with my head held high. I stepped directly toward the trembling woman kneeling on the expensive rug to deliver the ultimate revelation regarding my carefully hidden corporate identity. Refusing to utilize boastful titles or arrogant declarations about my wealth, I chose to dismantle her remaining sanity using nothing but absolute cold reality. Absolute shock instantly exploded across the entire gathered crowd the moment 30 silent relatives simultaneously realized the supposed family failure actually held the ultimate administrative authority. The specific investment fund that just ruthlessly fired you without any hesitation is the exact same financial institution I personally manage, I stated with piercing clarity while watching her tearful eyes widen in pure horror. Furthermore, the substantial monthly money you both confidently believed came from some generous anonymous benefactor. All these years actually never existed outside of my own personal bank accounts. I added while shifting my intense gaze toward my horrified parents. Ridiculous flattery immediately replaced the previous atmosphere of thick contempt the second Walter desperately attempted to leverage our shared biology to salvage the rapidly deteriorating situation. He quickly adjusted his posture to offer a sickeningly sweet smile while frantically praising my supposedly brilliant entrepreneurial skills to the surrounding stunned guests. Sylvia rushed forward with outstretched arms, attempting to warmly embrace the exact same daughter she recently suggested should become a lowly domestic servant for her golden child. Their sudden display of overwhelming parental affection felt incredibly repulsive, considering they spent my entire childhood actively destroying my self-esteem to elevate Carmen. I swiftly sidestepped her fake maternal gesture before explicitly announcing the permanent termination of every single financial allowance previously sustaining their completely carefree, extravagant lifestyle. Hearing that devastating declaration delivered a fatal psychological blow to their delicate egos by directly targeting the primary hidden source funding their unearned luxury. The entire foundational pride sustaining this toxic family structure collapsed completely upon the harsh realization that my financial protection was permanently withdrawn, effective immediately. They finally understood that their relentless cruelty over the past decade had systematically destroyed the only reliable safety net preventing their imminent socio-economic ruin. Watching the undeniable panic slowly creeping across their pale faces provided an immense sense of vindication for the vulnerable teenager they mercilessly kicked out 10 years ago. Every single relative who previously participated in the mocking laughter now stared at the floor while desperately trying to avoid making any direct eye contact with me. Nobody dared to utter a single word of defense for the disgraced regional manager, currently weeping uncontrollably over the shattered remnants of her fabricated career. The immense power dynamic within the room completely inverted itself without me ever needing to raise my voice or resort to their preferred method of physical violence. I simply wielded the undeniable power of corporate consequences to permanently strip away the protective illusions shielding them from the harsh realities of the actual world. The local bank accounts automatically receiving those generous anonymous deposits would receive official freeze notices by tomorrow morning to ensure they could not withdraw another single cent. Walter attempted to physically block my path while stammering pathetic apologies regarding his previous behavior, but his voice lacked any genuine remorse for his past actions. He only regretted losing access to the bottomless checking account funding his expensive country club memberships, along with the luxury vehicle parked outside the villa. Sylvia collapsed onto the nearby sofa while clutching her chest in sheer disbelief, because her precious social status within the affluent neighborhood was officially destroyed. Carmen continued sobbing loudly on the floor, while desperately reaching out to beg for a miraculous second chance at her utterly ruined corporate position. 2 hours after that pathetic theatrical performance finally concluded within the living room, I finished gathering my personal belongings to walk out of those heavy front doors forever. The heavy silence following my financial declarations had given them enough time to fully process the catastrophic consequences of their lifelong arrogance. Carmen completely lost whatever remaining composure she possessed, while frantically rushing forward to physically block my exit path near the grand foyer. Her previous aura of untouchable corporate supremacy had entirely evaporated into pure desperation as she desperately attempted to salvage some tiny fragment of her completely shattered pride. She stubbornly positioned herself directly blocking the main exit while breathing heavily like a cornered animal, realizing the absolute severity of its hopeless situation. Her eyes darted wildly around the empty hallway, seeking some invisible savior to magically restore the prestigious regional manager title she squandered through her own greedy arrogance. I swiftly slapped her reaching hand away with absolute disgust to firmly establish an impenetrable psychological perimeter separating our fundamentally different worlds. Setting that strict physical boundary clearly communicated that absolutely no biological connection would ever compel me to endure her toxic presence for another single second. You completely destroyed everything we spent years building, so do you actually think you have won tonight? Carmen screamed hysterically while angry tears aggressively ruined her expensive makeup. No, I simply stopped playing these pathetic corporate games with fundamentally corrupt people exactly like you, I replied, using a chillingly calm voice devoid of any familial affection. Hearing that definitive rejection caused her to physically recoil backward because she finally understood that my carefully executed retaliation contained absolutely zero room for future negotiations. My absolute freezing demeanor quickly shattered the frantic theatrical begging pouring from Walter alongside Sylvia as they desperately chased my determined footsteps toward the dark driveway. They continuously shouted hollow apologies, trying to manipulate my deeply buried childhood sympathy, but their transparent financial desperation only hardened my ultimate resolve to abandon them permanently. Walter practically tripped over his own expensive leather shoes trying to offer ridiculous promises regarding family counseling, while completely ignoring his decades of active participation in my emotional torment. Sylvia kept wailing about maternal love, despite spending the entire evening actively trying to humiliate me into becoming a lowly domestic servant for her precious golden child. Their sudden parental devotion felt remarkably insulting because they were clearly only mourning the sudden tragic death of their limitless bank accounts rather than the departure of their actual daughter. I ignored their pathetic chorus of selfish lamentations while walking gracefully down the concrete steps to approach the sleek corporate vehicle waiting silently by the curb. Julian stood professionally beside the opened passenger door while maintaining a completely neutral expression, despite witnessing the chaotic familial meltdown unfolding wildly across the manicured lawn. He respectfully nodded toward me before securing the perimeter to ensure nobody from the hysterical crowd could physically reach the vehicle before our scheduled departure. Stepping into the luxurious leather interior allowed me to permanently detach myself from the sheer despair currently consuming the three people frantically screaming my name into the night sky. The heavy car door slammed shut with a satisfying finality that completely muted their hysterical cries, while firmly sealing them inside their own self-inflicted nightmare. A profound wave of genuine psychological relief immediately washed over my tired shoulders, while the powerful vehicle slowly pulled away from the sprawling gated property without looking back. Successfully shedding the massive toxic burden of their relentless emotional abuse finally granted me the absolute freedom to officially close this remarkably painful chapter of my complicated life. I silently watched the luxurious neighborhood fade away through the tinted window, while fully embracing the peaceful quietness accompanying my hard-earned personal independence. Exactly 3 months passed since that disastrous evening unfolded, bringing severe tangible consequences paid out entirely in harsh reality without any exceptions. Not a single reputable financial institution dared to hire Carmen after multiple independent corporate auditors meticulously reviewed her extensive history of gross managerial incompetence. Her professional reputation was completely annihilated across the entire corporate sector because nobody wanted to employ an executive openly terminated for massive financial falsifications. Every specialized recruitment agency actively blacklisted her resume immediately upon discovering the catastrophic extent of her fraudulent retail reporting. The massive mortgage securing that ostentatious Calabasas villa was immediately recalled by the lending bank right after her corporate credibility officially evaporated into nothingness. Losing her prestigious title triggered an immediate catastrophic default, resulting in the rapid legal foreclosure of her beloved property within a matter of weeks. The heavily armed local sheriff deputies arrived promptly to oversee her humiliating physical eviction from the luxurious premises she falsely claimed to own. Walter, along with Sylvia, was unceremoniously forced to relocate into a remarkably dilapidated apartment complex located in a notably dangerous neighborhood. Their sudden drastic downgrade in living conditions occurred precisely because I ruthlessly terminated every single anonymous financial deposit maintaining their previous luxurious existence. They suddenly found themselves struggling to afford basic daily necessities after spending an entire decade comfortably surviving on the invisible generosity of their discarded daughter. The crushing realization of their absolute poverty finally stripped away the lingering remnants of their unjustified arrogance. Julian efficiently finalized an impenetrable fortress of strict legal barriers designed specifically to permanently neutralize any desperate communication attempts originating from my former relatives. He aggressively filed multiple restraining orders while utilizing severe corporate non-disclosure agreements to effectively block their relentless, pathetic efforts to extort further money. I completely insulated my current peaceful life from their ongoing financial misery to ensure my hard-earned corporate empire remained entirely untouched by their spectacular downfall. Experiencing this ultimate victory allowed me to focus entirely on expanding my lucrative investment portfolio without fearing any future familial interruptions. The Revenge Mode channel officially produced this narrative specifically to educate our global audience regarding vital personal boundaries, while demonstrating highly effective crisis management utilizing strict logical reasoning alongside powerful legal strategies against toxic family dynamics without resorting to unnecessary physical violence. The protagonist successfully protected her inherent dignity by executing a flawless strategic withdrawal that permanently severed all toxic biological connections without any lingering hesitation. The antagonistic relatives ultimately suffered the devastating yet completely justified natural consequences resulting directly from their own decades of relentless arrogance and unforgivable emotional abuse against an innocent family member. Looking back at this entire ordeal reveals several profoundly important lessons regarding establishing healthy boundaries alongside maintaining unwavering self-respect. First, sharing genetic material never grants anyone the automatic privilege to trample over your personal dignity or demand your unconditional subservience. Second, establishing total financial independence serves as your most impenetrable armor against manipulative relatives who seek to control your life through economic intimidation. Third, you possess absolutely no obligation to continuously shrink yourself just to accommodate the fragile egos of deeply insecure individuals. Always maintain the necessary courage to permanently sever those rotting familial roots so you can finally step into a future completely defined by your own authentic choices alongside your hard-earned personal freedom. Thank you so much for patiently listening to my personal journey on the Revenge Mode channel today, because I genuinely appreciate your incredible support throughout this difficult emotional journey toward personal liberation. How would you handle this exact situation if your biological family treated you this terribly? Please share your honest thoughts in the comments below, while remembering to subscribe to our channel for more empowering stories.
Câu chuyện này mang tính chất hư cấu nhưng lại khắc họa một hành trình trả đũa lạnh lùng nhưng có tính toán của một người phụ nữ bị gia đình ruồng bỏ. Từ tình huống bị sỉ nhục công khai tại bữa tiệc cho đến quyết định sa thải được kích hoạt chỉ bằng một cuộc gọi. Câu chuyện cho thấy quyền lực thực sự không nằm ở lời nói mà sự chuẩn bị. Ví dụ việc cô âm thầm thâu tóm công ty tại nơi Carmen làm việc đã tạo nền tảng cho cú lật kèo đầy thuyết phục. Tuy nhiên, cũng có thể tranh luận rằng hậu quả dành cho Carmen và gia đình mang màu sắc cực đoan, như việc mất nhà và bị cô lập hoàn toàn về tài chính. Điều này đặt ra câu hỏi đâu là ranh giới giữa công lý và trả thù. Từ câu chuyện, khán giả có thể rút ra bài học quan trọng, giá trị của tự lập tài chính, tầm quan trọng của ranh giới cá nhân và sự nguy hiểm của việc coi thường người khác. Bạn nghĩ nhân vật chính đã đi quá xa chưa? Nếu ở trong hoàn cảnh đó, bạn sẽ lựa chọn tha thứ hay cắt đứt hoàn toàn? Hãy chia sẻ quan điểm của bạn nhé!